Good evening, greatest of the nine. I just wanted to extend my thanks, my gratitude, my sincerity, um, all sorts of positive vibrations I want to amplify now using my own aura field. So I'll just let that pass with a little moment. I've always wanted to kind of approach the video thing with more of a balanced kind of understanding and thus a balanced knowledge and recognition of different topics. But what I'm finding is that the deeper you get into occult science, the deeper you get into kind of imparting a more ritualistic, you know, I guess, arrangement of how you live your life, it becomes kind of difficult to discuss what you consider mundane. And it's kind of odd that, mundane and profane seem to rhyme. The point being, the profane have always represented um, not necessarily stupid people, but the profane just constitutes somebody who's in today's context, their light has not been turned on. They're not woke. And what we have to realize about being woke, as I've mentioned before, is that certain people are woke. You can't determine somebody's status or their soul based on their physical behavior. As ludicrous as that sounds, you really can't do it because we're moving at a time on this planet where it's a quickening, so everything is becoming jaded when it comes to first impression and all this external stuff. But the fact of the matter is, I want to give an apology to my viewers and also to people who have kind of urged me to develop a more initiatory energy. Of course, here in the physical, we have to remember that we're always in this like transformation. So there really is no such thing as not doing anything. It's just all these conditions we've been trained to accept and these kind of indoctrination fences we've accepted to process. So, when somebody says, okay, well, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Like my preface, when you go deeper into occult science and you start to walk the left-handed path, you'll learn that less is more. And this is kind of one of those unintended mystical codes passed down from the ancients. Of course, you could use the English language trick and maybe write less is MOOR, and go about it that way. The fact of the matter is, this dark side, this whole taking the road less traveled, it kind of enables you to elevate beyond the mundane. And I wanted to open with that because I want to focus on something that most consider mundane, and that is race. And particularly with race, what is coming to a very unique point in this country. The key terms we want to keep in mind going forward here are scapegoat, mind control, and the bad guy, which is basically the same thing as scapegoat. So let's get into this. Why are we undergoing this time in society where there's so much blatant hostility, there's so much and don't misunderstand me for a plea to come together. I personally, I'm kind of with the Abraham Lincoln thing. I don't think that certain groups of people can coexist peacefully without some sort of finite conflict, and that conflict will give way to another series of conflicts simply based on internal value systems and the accessibility of the heart chakra energy. We won't go there right now. But as we've seen in Amerika, She's such a young nation. She's such a beautiful nation. And let's not get that confused. I think the first thing people do when they get into consciousness is they start getting on all of this non-patriotic stuff, and that's kind of a smokescreen in itself. That's another series of mind control, because you kind of have to, especially if you've done traveling around the world, you have to understand that America is a unique land. But if you haven't developed the, I guess, awareness or just common sense to realize you live in a special place, and you just want to join the profane, there it is, and bitch and moan about what's in the food, and what they're gonna do to the stores and the football stadiums and Walmart and this, all of this. I mean, it just gets old. But you have to understand the profane is the profane. We're dealing with correspondence here. It's all magnetism. If you belong to the profane ranks, you're gonna gravitate towards that information. If you want to sit back and tell people that they're not gonna vibrate to a higher dimension because they're eating cheeseburgers on Saturday, I mean, you rarely have another thing coming. Like, that's as polite as I can put it. Like, what is so special about these mundane aspects that you think they're going to be considered in the quickening? What makes you think that? I'm getting a little off topic here, but I'm getting back to it. It's just all these people, really of all races, kind of using the human ego as kind of a backdoor into this we can come together type thing. As much as they're preaching the together message, there's still this kind of idea of my way is the way to the heaven's gates with, titties and fruit and, all the rest of earthly pleasures. Anyway, so why is the scapegoat significant? Well, when slavery ended, see what the word eras do. Notice era has that word Ra in it. So anything involving Ra is going to involve strength, and it's going to involve a particular paradigm. Ra is also in paradigm. But anyway, so the paradigm shift had always been, since 1492, and even long before that, at least in the mind, the paradigm had always been to ostracize or declare opposition upon the so-called backwards people of the world. This is reinforced in Rudyard Kipling's White Man's Burden, which said that it was and we can find, remainders of this. And I mean, that's why all of this stuff about, save the animals and save the world and feed the Africans and, drop food. See, me saying that, I sound negative saying that because I'm criticizing. But when you have the second sight, you can see these things for what they are. Certain people in their heart feel that it is their burden to function in a society that benefits them. However, it is their burden to lend a helping hand, and intrinsically they believe that will be their salvation. But we're not even going to get into things like that. Okay, so scapegoat theory. During slavery, there had always been a notion of mentally to push everything negative and install, that's a better word, install everything that is negative, bad, and wicked into these character roles that have been designated as black and white. And what you have to realize about black and white in the English language is that black actually wasn't even a word until the 1400s. And what it meant was cold, barren, and lifeless. And so what the European societies and the upper echelon Europeans would do is they would start this trade of the lexicon, and they would turn, you've heard the phrase, turn the world upside down. They would literally create a new regime where the people with older genetic bloodlines would be considered evil, and they would become the scapegoats. And they would always, because of the numerical difference and because of their very ritualistic setup of the nation, you know, of course, as I opened up with the video, I talk about, moving into occult science and ritualistic arrangement in your life. That has nothing to do with the rituals that founding fathers were conducting. Yeah, they were, that entire inception was heavily cloaked in Freemasonry, which, I mean, is pretty common knowledge, but also we're moving into higher esoteric principles. But instead of learning it and cultivating it into, something for the people, they were actually using the energy that they were gathering from all this death and distortion via the people who they declared enemies. So until this day, and that's why in this country right now you're seeing such a blatant output of it, is because the scapegoat has been black people for so long. Yeah, you got your Native Americans and the whole Hispanic thing, but psychologically, and I really don't blame them, psychologically, a lot of Hispanics are, hooked up with the European financial model of the dollar. In other words, they got this shit together when it comes to that dollar. So you're not going to find masses of Hispanic people. I could be wrong. You're not going to find masses of Hispanic people really embracing that aspect of the scapegoat, because they have found ingenious ways to allow currency to work for their country and domestically, and still encourage cohesion within the cultures. You got your little beef here and there, but for the most part, that dollar is changing hands, but their allegiance is not changing. So the reason I say that is because black people, or African Americans, are the only scapegoat where they literally don't know what's going on. We literally don't know what's going on. And as a result, it is easier for other populations to sit and, get all mad and say, they just did this and they're so lazy and they don't want to work and they don't want to read and they don't want to educate. But the beautiful part of all that is that if you look at the American political system and how it's going, it's coming a time where this has to be what I like to call the emergence of a new scapegoat. Because if blacks no longer serve as this adequate, drop-off point for all of America's, undesirable energy, if you will, now it comes to the forefront where everybody will have to elect a new scapegoat, but it's not going to be at a poll or through some sort of formal thing. It's going to be based on the sensibility factor. And this is why people need to stop hating on Trump and redirect that energy and see what's taking place scientifically, and not look at it as such a, he's doing this, crazy white man this, crazy white man that. Again, these populations of people, for the most part, aren't really going to change, But, in schools, we're not learning about the scientific correlation between genetics and emotion. We're not learning about, currency and its relationship to water. We're not learning about, all of these very hidden yet very visible principles that govern things like our law system, like I just said, our money system, even the occult aspects of sports. None of this is being explored, on a regulated paradigm level. So, bringing it home, the scapegoat in this nation is about, it's either gonna go one or two ways, or it might go both ways gradually. The first way is that there's gonna be a complete explosion of emotion, and that's gonna come at the arrival of this: who is the scapegoat? Who can we blame? Okay, because to blame somebody, you have to know the extent of the problem you're blaming them for. But if you've been comfortable in the mythology that these people have always been a problem, and in case you aren't following my wit here, what I'm saying is if Caucasian Americans have never really had to have a reason to see, that was the whole thing with the founding fathers. Now, I'm about to close. They understood by, you can study from a people and, have your way with their women and do all of these things. Somehow they could justify that, right? I'm not justifying it. But they could say you could completely obliterate this culture and yet still immortalize our position here, and you don't really have to provide a reason. And so because Caucasian Americans rarely check themselves on why they have such a tendency, I didn't say everybody's a hater, I didn't say everybody's the same, I said there's such a tendency to hate. If not hate, it's to manipulate. If not manipulate, it's to jeer or ridicule or somehow exploit this person or entity that you've never really had to explain why you hate them. I've had someone say that to me personally. So this idea of, see, that's what true freedom has been perceived to be. Is that I can function in a system and preach to you this equality bullshit, but at the same time, I can live right beside you and not explain to you why my system systematically despises you. I don't have to explain that. That's what people have registered as true freedom, but it's coming to a point where that system is not going to support itself without, some sort of refinement. So it's becoming more and more difficult to keep the scapegoat at just that. You want to eliminate it, or second option, a new one is born. But who? Who can you blame? See, scapegoats live psychologically. You can't combat a feeling. You can't. Why do you think the hell why do you think they run it on the news all the time? Race, 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 race. Look who got killed in Texas, and race, and race, and race. You can't fight that. There's no, game plan or strategy you can use to fight race. So this is the games they play. And, first in your own mind, no matter what you look like, you have to ask yourself, who or what have you been utilizing as a scapegoat? Are you some conscious person and you've been saying, fuck the government and fuck the school system and fuck all that? And, have you not traded the energy you've been trying to leave, for really, just a new cape? Likewise, there's all sorts of evolving you can do. Have you been one of these people I've been referring to? Same with black people. Have you been, kind of pondering what the same white person that pays the same light bill you do, you've been acting as if they're in on something? It's all of these different mechanisms we have that are totally validated by society. We can just keep using the same mechanisms to keep blaming the same people that we really don't know about, but it feels so good to have somebody to blame and not have a reason to explain. That's my entire transmission to you this evening, is that first, the apology for being so scattered and, getting into some more personal rituals and some more rites of passage in my, spiritual advancements and all of that. Just kind of having kind of a focus that's been everywhere, but I've definitely been focusing on some aspects of what I like to call mundane stuff, and how it's all kind of reaching this summit where things are going to be refined in a way that, I think we're ready for.